Alex had been stationed at the intergalactic refugee settlement for 6 months now. His mission was simple: to ensure peace among the many alien species who had fled from their war-torn worlds. But the refugees were often more than just victims of conflict. They were the forgotten, abandoned by their own kind. No one cared for them, and though Alex tried his best to treat everyone with respect, there was little he could do to erase their pain. He was used to the daily grind of checking in on the settlement's residents, making sure the supplies were delivered and that no one caused trouble. The settlement was a temporary refuge, built quickly by humans and other alien species, designed to hold refugees until they could be sent to proper homes or resettled on new planets. But it wasn't a place of hope. It was a place where people hid from the past, locked away in the shadows of their former lives. One evening, as Alex walked through the narrow, dimly lit corridors of the settlement, he heard something strange, a faint sound, barely audible above the usual noise of busy voices and clattering metal. It was a cry, soft and distant, but it cut through the air like a knife. Alex paused, listening carefully. The cry was not human. It was something else, something small, fragile and utterly helpless. He turned down a long hallway, his footsteps echoing off the cold metal walls. The sound grew louder, more desperate. He had heard similar cries before. Children who had lost their families. Children who were too afraid to speak. But this was different. This cry was filled with pain and loneliness. The kind of loneliness that came from being completely forgotten. Alex's heart clenched. He followed the sound, weaving through the darkened hallways, his boots clicking against the metal floor. It wasn't long before he found the source. In the corner of a small room, huddled under a blanket, was a child. But not a human child. This one was different. Her skin was a pale shade of blue, her hair a soft silver, and her eyes, large and filled with tears, looked up at him in surprise and fear. Alex froze, his breath catching in his throat. The child was alone, her small body trembling with fear. She was an alien, but there was no mistaking the terror in her eyes. She was just a child, and like any child, she needed comfort. But in this place, comfort was a rare thing. The other refugees had all passed by this hallway, ignoring the small alien girl in the corner. It wasn't that they didn't care. They were simply too afraid of her kind, too afraid of the war that had brought her here. The war that had taken so much from everyone. The child's cry faded into soft sobs as Alex stepped closer. He knelt down beside her, reaching out a hand, his voice gentle. "Hey, it's okay," he said softly. "You're not alone." The alien girl flinched at first, her eyes wide and fearful. She was small, almost fragile, and Alex could feel her vulnerability. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know what he could do. But she was clearly alone. And Alex couldn't just leave her like this. "Where's your mom?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The child didn't respond. Instead, she looked down at the floor, her small hands clutching the blanket tightly around her shoulders. Alex's heart ached. He could see the pain in her eyes, the confusion, the feeling of abandonment that so many of these refugees carried with them. The human race had fought to protect this galaxy, to protect the innocent. But in the end, they had failed. "Don't worry," Alex said, his voice more firm now as he gently pulled the child into his arms. "I'm here. You're safe now. I won't leave you." The child's sobs softened as she clung to him. "Mom," she whispered through her tears. "Mom, where are you?" Alex didn't know how to answer her. He didn't know where her mother was, or if she was even alive. But one thing was clear. The child needed someone, anyone, to show her kindness. And in that moment, Alex knew he couldn't just walk away. He gently rocked her in his arms, trying to soothe her, trying to calm the storm of emotions that had overtaken her tiny body. Her sobs began to slow, and she turned her tear-streaked face up to him. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you helping me?" Alex smiled gently, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Because no one should be alone," he said simply. "Not you. Not anyone." For a moment they sat in silence, the only sound the child's soft breathing and the occasional hum of the settlement's engines. It was a quiet night, but for Alex it felt like the universe had shifted in that small, simple act of reaching out to another being. He looked down at the alien child in his arms, and though she wasn't human, she felt more real than any of the people he had met in this cold, broken place. Her eyes, filled with fear and sadness, had already begun to trust him just a little. But that little trust was enough. He stood up, carefully holding the child in his arms. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's get you out of here. You need to be safe." As he carried the child through the dim hallways, he could feel the weight of the eyes on him. The other refugees watched, some curious, some disapproving. But Alex didn't care. He had made his choice. He couldn't fix the past, but he could do something for this child. When they reached his quarters, Alex placed the child gently on his bed. She didn't fight him, didn't resist. She simply looked at him with those wide, trusting eyes. The quiet sobs had stopped, but there was still sadness in her gaze. "Do you have a name?" Alex asked, sitting down beside her. He could feel the weight of her sadness, but he knew it was going to take time. Time for her to heal and time for him to figure out what to do next. She nodded slowly, her voice trembling. "Lyra," she said. "My name is Lyra." Alex smiled warmly, nodding. "All right, Lyra," he said softly. "You're safe here. You don't have to worry anymore." But as he looked at the small alien child in front of him, a part of him wondered how long it would take for her to truly believe that. How long it would take for her to trust him completely. And how long it would take for him to protect her from the rest of the world. The days passed slowly in the refugee settlement, and Alex had done everything he could to make the alien child feel at home. He had named her Lyra, and though she was still quiet and withdrawn, there were moments when she seemed to open up just a little. She would sit next to him as he worked, her tiny hands clutching his sleeve as if afraid he might disappear if she let go. And in return, Alex kept his promises. He made sure she was fed, he made sure she felt safe, and most importantly, he made sure she knew she was not alone. It wasn't easy. There were still whispers about the human soldier who had taken in the alien child. Some of the refugees looked at Alex with disapproval, as if he had betrayed his own kind by showing kindness to one of their enemies. Others just ignored them both, too busy with their own troubles to care. But Alex didn't care about the whispers. He cared about Lyra. He cared about the way she clung to him when the nightmares came, the way she would whisper in her sleep calling for her mother. He couldn't answer her questions about where her mother was or whether she was still alive. But what Alex did know was that he wasn't going to let Lyra go through this alone. One evening, after a long day of overseeing the distribution of food and supplies, Alex returned to his quarters to find Lyra sitting by the window, staring out at the stars. It had become a routine for her, sitting there watching the night sky, her small hands pressed against the cold glass, as if looking for something or someone. Alex approached quietly, sitting beside her. He didn't speak at first, knowing that sometimes Lyra didn't need words. They both simply stared out at the stars, the only sound the soft hum of the settlement's engines. "Do you miss them?" Alex asked gently, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your people?" Lyra didn't turn to look at him, but he could see the sadness in her eyes as she nodded slowly. "I miss my mom," she whispered. "I miss her voice. I miss her warmth. She promised she would always be there." Alex felt a lump in his throat. He didn't know what to say. He couldn't promise her that he would ever be able to replace her mother. But he could promise that he would always be there for her, in whatever way she needed. "You're not alone, Lyra," he said quietly. "I'll always be here." For a moment the room was still. The child's sobs were soft, but Alex could feel the weight of them. It was the kind of sadness that could never be fully healed. But Alex wasn't giving up on her. He wasn't giving up on making sure that she didn't have to face that sadness alone. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet routines. Alex did his best to make Lyra feel like part of the world again. He would sit with her, teaching her the language of the humans even though she still often spoke in her native tongue. It was slow progress, but every day Lyra spoke a little more. One afternoon, as they walked through the settlement's central courtyard, Lyra stopped and tugged on Alex's sleeve. Her eyes were wide with wonder, and her small hand pointed to a group of children playing in the distance. "Can I play with them?" she asked, her voice uncertain. Alex turned to look at the other children. They were playing with a ball, laughing and shouting, unaware of the lonely girl watching from the sidelines. Alex's heart ached. He knew how hard it would be for Lyra to join them. She was different, her skin, her eyes, her voice. Everything about her marked her as someone from another world. But Alex could see the longing in her eyes. She wanted to belong. She wanted to be like the other children. He bent down to her level, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You can play with them, Lyra, just be yourself. You don't have to be like anyone else." Lyra looked at him for a long moment, her eyes filled with doubt. What if they don't want to play with me? Alex smiled softly. Then we'll find someone who will. But I think they'll want to play with you. You just have to give them a chance. Lyra hesitated for a moment longer, then slowly nodded. She stepped forward, her small feet unsure but determined. Alex watched as she walked toward the group of children, her head held high despite the fear in her heart. He stayed back, watching from a distance. At first, the other children glanced at her with confusion, but as Lyra stood there waiting for someone to approach her, one of the children, a boy no older than Lyra, came forward. He smiled shyly and held out the ball to her. "Do you want to play?" he asked in a soft, tentative voice. Lyra's face lit up with surprise. You want to play with me?" The boy nodded, still holding out the ball. "Yeah, we can all play together, come on." Lyra took the ball hesitantly at first, but then her smile grew, and she joined the other children in their game. For the first time since Alex had found her, he saw her laughing. She was no longer the lonely child he had carried into his quarters. She was just a child, playing like any other child, free from the weight of her past, if only for a moment. Alex stood at the edge of the courtyard, his heart swelling with pride. He hadn't just saved Lyra from being alone, he had given her a chance to belong. A chance to be more than just a refugee, a chance to be a child again. The days that followed were filled with more laughter, more play, and more moments of growth for Lyra. She began to feel more at home in the settlement, and Alex continued to teach her, not just the language of humans, but the ways of kindness, compassion, and love. But there were still hard days. Days when the memories of her mother would come flooding back, when the sadness would overwhelm her. On those days, Alex would hold her close, reassuring her that no matter how hard it got, he would always be there. He was her family now. He was her protector. And slowly, Lyra began to believe him. As the weeks passed, the settlement began to change. It was no longer just a place of survival. It was becoming a place of healing. Alex had done more than just take in an abandoned child. He had given her the chance to heal, to grow, and to find her place in the world again. And in doing so, he had found something he hadn't known he needed: purpose and a new family, one that was not bound by blood but by love. Lyra still missed her mother. That would never change. But Alex had given her something far more important, a chance at a new beginning. And together they would face whatever the future held.